My next guest is Dr. Mike Nagler. Michael is a superintendent of the Mineola School District, a suburb of New York City. Mike began his career as a social studies teacher in New York City. While teaching, he earned his doctorate from Columbia University and accepted an administrative position with Mineola in 1999. He believes strongly in the district's mission to inspire students to become lifelong learners that exhibit strength of character and contribute positively to a global society. During his 18 years with the district, he has been a big proponent of using technology to engage students in rigorous content. Mike has also been instrumental in creating a platform to assess student learning using electronic portfolios and digital badges. He's even coded his own digital portfolio, and I'll link that in the show notes. All 5 schools in Mineola have been recognized as Apple Distinguished Schools. Mineola is also a member of the League of Innovative Schools. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here.
Well, we were connected because of a common publisher for your book and mine that's coming out, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we'll start off with the question I ask everybody. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Oh, well, I have that many times. The life of a superintendent kind of lives in the trenches, but I think my seminal story would be about 14 years ago when I first became superintendent. And I was the deputy superintendent, so I kind of knew what I was getting myself into. But the district was not in good shape. We had failed budgets. We used to have 7 schools. 3 of those 7 had less than 200 kids. And we were just hemorrhaging money. So my first task as the newly minted superintendent was to close 2 schools. I'm still here. So, I mean, the good part of the story is it all worked out. But I think the lessons learned from that first 2 years of that process helped me throughout my career. I think the big distinction was the history of the district. They closed the school before and they reopened it, and it was the method they used was to close one neighborhood school, and only that neighborhood suffered in the reconfiguration. So one of the lessons learned for us was we couldn't repeat that. We had to do things differently. So we reconfigured the entire district. But we made a promise at the time that whatever savings we had, we'd reinvest back into the entire system, whether capital, curricular, new initiatives. And we're still reaping the benefits of money from that closing. And that enabled us to go down this technology path and a one-to-one initiative when the iPad first came to market almost 11 years ago. And I kind of like to forget some of the things that went on because it was incredibly nasty and it was personal and it was attacks and you name it, it went on. But in hindsight, that was all necessary to get to the place we are. So, typical trench story, I guess, is when you're living it, you don't know how you're going to make it through. But when you look back, it's like, okay, we did that. We're ready for the next one.
And I think, having already been at the helm of the district and going through that, it was probably easier once you were working through just different changes during the pandemic with the district leadership, correct? That maybe having had that experience already helped you.
Yeah. I mean, for the pandemic really didn't throw us. We already had a digital, every kid had a device, they were all connected. We had a learning management system, we had an infrastructure. We added in one day WebEx, so we had the ability to have a secure video stream. And I included in the email, in the book, an email a teacher wrote me like 2 days after. And basically thanking me for my leadership, but more importantly, they said, she wrote, little did we know that we have been rehearsing for this moment for the last 10 years. And we were able to deliver for kids things that other places weren't, because we kind of were already in that virtual world. Yeah.
And what year did you all start the one-to-one devices?
2010, 11. So, basically, the concept of future ready and all the, preparing for the 21st century, we're 22 years in, and people are still just starting to grasp the enormity of the task to make a digital ecosystem and make it work. But at the same time, the benefits from it are astronomical. I mean, you really reap the benefit when you go down that path.
Yeah, and it's good to hear that you guys had already, used some of the money from closing these schools to something you would have had to do, and you would have been late to the game had you waited, 9 more years, right?
Yeah. It's pretty funny. While you simultaneously are closing, we're launching a fairly unique initiative at the time, but it was all under the same guise of, if we're going to do this, if we're going to change the way we think about school, let's do it across the board.
Yeah. So I mentioned we have a common publisher, which is Road to Awesome. And so your book, the Dev book, was published in April. So it's design thinking around visionary planning, leadership book. So talk to me a little bit about what the book entails, and then we can go through kind of working to get it published as well.
Yeah, so the book is really trying to grapple with the ambiguous nature of speed of change. So if you look at purely from a technology standpoint, the speed in which we constantly iterate and innovate is exponential. And schools do very little, in my opinion, to match that speed. And a lot of times they stick their head in the sand and make believe it doesn't exist. But, we're putting our kids into a world that is not the same world we entered when we left high school. The one example I give is a 2020 graduate. If you go back to when they started kindergarten in 2007, that was the first year the iPhone was introduced. And over the course of their school career, a fairly seminal moment happened when mobile devices surpassed desktops, and information became even more ubiquitous. There's Chris Kultura wrote a book, and he analogized that moment was similar to the Gutenberg press, where you have all of this information going out in the world, and what are we doing with it, and how, as we as teachers and learners, actually use it. And I think that so that's over one student's course of their career in your school district. So how do we deal with it? We really didn't do much. The education system is tried and true, and it happens time and time again where, we go through the grades, we pass our courses, we graduate, we send some kids to college and some kids to the workforce, maybe some to the military, and that's not the world a lot of our kids are going into. And that's really the basis of the book. Like how should we, as a new wave of leaders, think about kids entering life after high school?
So when you started writing this book, was that during the pandemic, or did you already have a lot of it done before then? And then when did you start looking for somebody to publish it?
Well, I foolishly look for someone to publish it last. In hindsight, that was not a good idea. I'm a history person, history major. I write like a history person would, which really is not the best way to write an educational book. So I did a ton of reading around my topics. I took notes on all these books I read. I converted them to digital files. So I was knee deep before the pandemic, and the pandemic kind of helped give me more time to do that. And I wrote it like a research paper. And I pitched it to a couple of people, and they really did not like it. And when I happened upon Darren, who was doing a book study with my high school teachers, and my high school principal called me and says, "Hey, you really should talk to him because he's launching a publishing company." He loved the concept and was willing to take a chance on my writing ability. I ended up rewriting the entire thing. I made it much more personal, much more first person. And what the funny story related is when he gave the wrong link to his editor. So when she started reading the book, she read the first version. And she sent me this long email about, well, we're really going to have to rework a lot of these things. And I was crushed. I'm like, man, I thought it was really good. And then I said, what is she talking about? And obviously she read the wrong one. So I had to send her a new link with the copy that's currently in print. So it went well after that.
Yeah. And I see that, like a lot of people who have doctorate degrees and then write books, they want to write it like their dissertation and, have that review of literature and all that. And like you learned the hard way. So, you told me also there are a lot of QR codes embedded. Are those to videos or articles? Kind of what can people expect to find as outside resources?
Yeah, so we're unique in Mineola. We have a professional videographer on staff. Okay. So we generate, we probably have close to 1,000 professional educational videos. And I enjoy acting in them. Okay. So we typically do it around either an initiative we're launching or a unique concept that we're trying to explain to the community. So in some cases, they're promotional videos, and in other cases, they're just fun educational videos. I did one on longitude and latitude that has, I think, 1.2 million views. Wow. It just, it has a chainsaw. So it's very intriguing to students. But most of the QR codes are in reference to the initiatives that we launched. And I was super excited to do it because I wanted to be able to tie our YouTube channel, which is called Mineola Creative Content. I wanted to tie that into the things I was speaking about. So it worked out really well. And, the second part of the book is really about practice. So I've invited 17 teachers, parents, kids to write pieces in relationship to the theory I was discussing in the first half. So we have a lot of, I think I use, like, don't take my word for it, ask the people doing the work. So you get that hands-on experience of different people as they implemented some of the concepts.
Yeah, and that way, people can see kind of hands-on, like what you're actually doing in your district. It's not just something you're writing about, but you've actually implemented a lot of this, correct?
Yeah, I'm big on, if I read an educational book, I want to know, well, how does it help me, or how does it apply to things I'm doing? And a lot of times it's theory. It's just, I say there's no meat on the bone. It's a great concept, but when you it's not going to work. So we try to back up everything we said we were going to do. We give references and other perspectives of how it happened.
So talk to me a little bit about just the current state of your district in terms of, are you all experiencing much turnover? Because, we know in the past couple of years, several teachers have retired or left education. So what are things that your district's doing to maybe help people who are coming into the district and retain staff who are already in the district?
Yeah, so we have had a lot of turnover. I don't think it's necessarily correlated to the pandemic. I just think it's a factor of where people were in their careers and their age. But we've had about, I want to say 45 to 50 new teachers in the last 4 years. So we knew it was something we had to pay a little more attention to. So we have a multi-pronged approach with our young staff. We have something called the New Teacher Workshop, and it's a cohort group. So everyone that comes in that year, regardless of level they teach or subject they teach, are together as a cohort. And we support them. We hold classes after school, and it concludes with 15 hours, and we actually issue them a credit, which they can then apply towards a salary differential when they get enough credits. But I think the beauty of it is that they do action research. We teach them, well, here are some of the things current in the literature. What if you tried it in class? Can you share with us how that would work from a firsthand experience? So at the end of the year, they all do presentations in front of all the administrators about the topic they implemented and how they think it went. That is aside from every new teacher gets a teacher mentor and an administrative coach. And they each serve different functions. The teacher mentor is exactly that. How do I get through the nuts and bolts and all the things we do in the district and timelines, and who do I look for support? And the coach is really more about pedagogy. Let me come into the class. Let me arrange visitation in other classes for you to see how you're teaching your subject. And the administrator coach is never their evaluator. The person that evaluates them is completely different. So all those pieces are just support mechanisms to, it can be overwhelming when you walk into a district that is so tech forward. And we do things very differently than where you would do your student teaching. And we understand that. So we want to have those supports in place for our folks to make sure they're doing the best they can, and we're helping them do that.
On the pre-chat, you gave me an example about computer science. So give me an example about how the teachers maybe were able to move that curriculum forward from K until the AP exam that a lot of kids took in computer science.
Yeah, so I use this expression in the book, ENR thinking. It's an evolution, not a revolution thinking. So slow change over time is more effective than trying to shock the system. So we knew computer science is an important topic and language that all of our learners should know. So we had a multi-pronged approach to how we were going to ultimately, this year, every single ninth grader took the AP computer science principles test and get the results back. But I'm very hopeful we did well on it. But that's 200 kids. So how do you get from not teaching computer science at all, where every single ninth grader takes that test? And it starts in kindergarten. So, we support computational thinking and design thinking using an engineering model to make sure kids understand it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. Everybody does. It's how you learn from those mistakes and move forward. And that's a philosophy we use. We basically teach computer science through our librarians. We've trained them to be age appropriate and to give work. A lot of it's sequencing in the early grades. And then we start with Scratch and block code and teach them how to block code. And then we'll parallel curriculum assignments with coding assignments. So for example, when I was a kid, I used to love to make dioramas, but we really don't do that anymore. So instead of a diorama project, can you do a coding project to explain that subject?
Okay.
And we marry the curriculum side to the coding side, and we generate all these coding projects that are really based in content. As they get progressed through the grades, we make those mandatory. So you have, in science in the 5th grade, you have to do a coding project around the content. And ultimately, in the 6th and 7th grade, they begin to take computer science courses. And we've partnered with an online platform. It's it's really the E in dev. The E in dev is entrepreneurial. So I went out and found a company that was a startup, and we partnered together and built a computer science platform. That's currently, I think, 60 or 70 districts use it on Long Island in New York. So it's build it and they will come. So we were able to build this out, and we built badges, so it follows our badging system. And we got to a point where we thought like 5th graders would learn Scratch. We found that 2nd graders were learning Scratch. So all this planning we did where we were going to teach things became irrelevant because everything shifted younger and younger. So we laid down this gauntlet. Okay, if that's happening and the kids love doing it and they're doing it with a speed we didn't recognize, why can't they all take an AP test? So we started to, 2 years ago, I threw that gauntlet down, and we started to prepare our 7th graders and then the 8th graders and then our 9th graders. It really was not a lot of, it was not a lot of pushback on doing that rigor of work. And that certainly wasn't my goal when we started computer science. And I think that's where the evolution leadership comes in, is that when you examine this initiative that starts to take a different shape, how do you adjust? How do you pivot to make it more meaningful and pay attention to what's going on to properly prepare going forward? And I think that's really it's the best example of what the book is trying to relay, is that if you're looking forward and paying attention to what's going on, you're going to have better opportunities for kids in the future. And it's incumbent upon the school district and the leaders to recognize that and do something about it.
Yeah, you've told me that you guys have you're now using badge books in pre-K through 2, so you eliminated report cards, and other districts are have copied kind of how you guys are using that. And you also have an integrated curriculum pre-K through 7. So a lot of what you guys are doing with the dev thinking, right, is being used not only in your district by many in the area.
Yeah, and it's all free on our website. So if you are curious about our badge book, it's actually, we're rolling out grade 4 next year. So those students, since they were in pre-K, have not had report cards. So we have the badge system instead. And our website is www.mineola.k12.ny.us. It's a very user-friendly website. But the badge books are there. The integrated curriculum is there. We're big believers that everything should be open educational resources, and that if you want to use it, feel free. We'd love for you to just tell us you're doing that. But I know of districts all over the country that have adopted it, modified it, made it work for them. So I'm proud of that.
So talk to me a little bit about this new teacher. You talked a little bit already about the sort of that coaching cycle, the cohorts, kind of how do they receive PD credit and how long are they in this cohort? And what happens after they finish the cohort?
Well, we have a tenure process in New York that takes 4 years to earn tenure, and then you get some different benefits from the union So during their entire probationary period, they're in a learning mode in our cohort system. And some of the things we've found over the years is not all learning is a 15-hour, 1 credit block, and not all learning is in a 40 or 30-minute block. So we've established what we did for our kids. We made a digital repository for our teachers. Okay. I like to call it pajama PD. So if you, whenever you're ready to do it and need to do it, you can access it and receive credit for it. We call them stackables because they're typically 3-hour courses, and you can group or stack the 3 hours to get to 15, and we'll give you credit. Most of those courses are around technology. So we found, like, if you want to learn how to use Nearpod, it really doesn't take you more than 3 hours to learn how to use Nearpod. You need to practice a lot with it, but we can give you the basics in a short amount of time, and I don't need to be one-to-one. We'll give you the ability to ask questions and to seek an expert on staff if you want the one-to-one tutorial. But most of our younger crowd have grown up doing the video stuff, and so it's appropriate for them. And it's just another mechanism of support that we have that allows our teachers to acclimate a lot quicker. And
so how many credits, like in terms of hours, do they need by the end of the 4 years to get tenure?
For the state, they need 175 hours of continuing ed over 5 years.
Okay.
So that's for a state requirement for the certification. We don't have a requirement. It's just it ends up working out to about 5 credits. Okay. So each year is a credit for 4, and then the stackables and other time they could put in will end up in about 5 credits of in-service. Okay. So which is, if they took a couple of college classes, would get them to a salary differential a lot faster.
So it's that not only the training that's required for that induction period, but also it goes towards their salary increment. So it's a win-win.
Yes, we like to think of it that way. And we like for our teachers to build the courses. So our senior people, we pay them to build out the virtual courses. So there's something for everyone and as an aside, I kind of like that we have our teachers that are actually using this technology, let them design the course. And I'm very big on treating teachers as professionals. If this isn't a job, it's a profession. So if they do something, we should pay them to do it. And selfishly, I get it as a resource that I could use over and over and over again. And they get paid to create it one time. So it's a win-win. It's another win-win.
Well, talk to me a little bit about tips that you would give for leaders in terms of people going into principal jobs or superintendencies, since you've been in that seat for quite a while.
Yeah, I think the greatest advice I can give is you have to have a flexible mindset. You really need to distill what we have to do and what you want to do, and find that bridge between those two things. Because a lot of us, we go in with all these grandiose ideas only to get beaten down by the system. And that's a natural occurrence in our profession, but we can't let that defeat us. I like this expression, failure without defeat. So you keep plugging through and keep trying things and fighting the system. The system is not perfect. And I think it's becoming more imperfect as the world changes in a different way. So we don't need leaders that are just going to do the same old, same old. We need people that are going to be innovative and work toward changing the system while still working in the confines of it. And that's possible. It doesn't sound probable, but it certainly is possible. And I think that's if you're going to take the challenge of becoming a leader, that's really the mindset you need.
And so we talked a lot today about just your book, the curriculum that you've been developing in your district, the initiatives you all put in place when you started the superintendency. Out of everything we talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I think that the world is changing, and that change causes an ambiguity in what we do.
Yeah.
And there's a nervousness and an anxiousness that's natural when that happens. And we need to learn to embrace that. If we can embrace that, we can conquer it. If we let it overwhelm us, it will overwhelm us. So I think I like the expression, the only human that embraces change is a baby with a dirty diaper. And we need to be better at that. Change is constant. We need to start to embrace it a little more. But more than that, we need to plan for the future. The other expression that comes to mind is Wayne Gretzky's go to where the puck is going to be, not where it is. So how do we as educational leaders go to where the puck is going to be and plan appropriately for the children in our care? And I think that's really the next generation of leaders.
Yeah, that's great to remember. Where can people connect with you and find you online?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Twitter at Nagler's Notions, NAGLERS NOTIONS. That was the name of my old blog post. So that's where it came from. If I was starting over it, I would not use that handle, but such as it is.
Sounds good. I'll make sure to link that and your district website in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for being my guest on the Out of the Trenches podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a good time.